Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Today on CityCast Boise. Our city's Pride Flag Showdown continues, and it's raising big questions about local power and inclusivity. Meanwhile, Governor Little is reshaping Idaho's forest policy to fight wildfires. But will it help or hurt public lands? And we're easing into the weekend with sound baths and art to help us recharge. It's Friday, April 25th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Happy Friday, everyone. Joining me for another news roundup is our Hey Boise newsletter editor, Blake Hunter. Thanks so much for being here today, Blake.
Hey, Lindsay. Happy to be here.
I definitely want to hear your take on the latest flag fiasco. I don't know. What are we labeling this? The flag debacle, the April flag debacles in Boise?
Yeah, the spring, I don't know. What are they going to write in the history books about this? It's getting ridiculous at this point.
It's all about flags in April in Boise. But the latest maybe uproar or thing that's gotten people talking is that several people on Easter Sunday went to Boise City Hall and they put garbage bags over the pride flag that's still flying at City Hall and put an Appeal to Heaven flag. Now, that's a flag that has a tree on it, and its white background says Appeal to Heaven. And they filmed themselves doing it in kind of a Mission Impossible style format. Yeah. I feel like that's honestly being generous. What you're picturing in your mind is way cooler than what they did. And anyway, then the mayor came and that day, Easter morning, took down the garbage bags, took down the Appeal to Heaven flag. What is going on in Boise with flags right now?
I don't know. I mean, and like the broader context that we're like kind of laughing at is that like just a few weeks ago, the city, all in my perspective, I'll just say what I think the city really, really fumbled the redesign of its flag. And then, honestly, I feel like the city's been able to like reclaim the flag discourse by kind of standing on the pride flag. Of course, this is because House Bill 96 was passed earlier, just a few weeks ago, really, and it's already caused a whole kerfuffle where, you know, legislators wanted to target cities that were flying the pride flag, basically just Boise, and to get those taken down. And there's just no teeth to the bill. So this, I think, has just become there's nothing more symbolic than a flag, but the flag itself, like there are symbols right now of this identity question about what Boise wants to be. You know, the mayor's making a pretty strong stand by insisting this, and, you know, even against the attorney general and even against, you know, the Ada County sheriff and all of the legislature saying, we're going to keep flying this because we always have been, you know, for about a decade. And to me, it's just an interesting place for her to draw the line. So I'm really curious to see how that plans out. You and I have both watched so many court cases, you know, go back and forth between the city and the state, or at least be threatened. What are your thoughts? Like, is the city putting too much on the line here? What's going on?
You know, that's such an interesting question because of how this bill was written. Again, there's no enforcement mechanism. It doesn't criminalize or penalize not following this law in any way. Like, there's none of that within the law. It's a symbolic gesture that does have real world impact on people. But I kind of wonder if this was a way for the city to say, you know, like, if you can't enforce it, we're going to continue to be Boise. And I had a conversation recently that will be airing soon with a city representative who talked about this, that during the legislative session, there were several bills that very specifically targeted Boise. And that's been something the legislature does again and again and again. And so I kind of wonder, or it kind of feels to me like this is Boise pushing back and saying like, okay, you keep targeting us very specifically. I mean, the bills don't say Boise, but they essentially do. And so no, this is you didn't write this with an enforcement mechanism. You didn't write this in a way that we could be punished for continuing to do what we've done for years and years and years. So I don't know, too bad, so sad. Maybe do your job better. Is that kind of the vibe you're getting?
That's the vibe that I'm getting. And then, of course, the response to that is like, well, Representative Heather Scott from up north Idaho, she's, one of the farthest right, I would say, legislators in the state. And she's the legislator that has been most ardent in advocating for the overturn of Obergefell v. Hodges, which, legalized same-sex marriage across the United States. So she's willing to wade into those waters. And so she responded to the city by saying, those are going to be expensive flags because we're going to like penalize you for that. So then my kind of devil's advocate question is like, is this worth it? Like, what is the city risking by making such a symbolic gesture where like, it's kind of something that I go back and forth on as a queer Boisean myself, where I'm just like, is such a symbol worth it when we just don't know what the risks are going to cost? What do you think about that?
Our Attorney General Raul Labrador has made a couple of statements, sent a letter to the mayor, but then also made a statement saying like, hey, I can only enforce laws as they're written, not laws as everyone wishes they were written. And he acknowledged this doesn't have an enforcement mechanism. And so there isn't an enforcement that he can push the city, push on the city, that really this was a skills issue on the legislators' side. And so like what are you going to do? Like he can't make up parts of his job because people are upset with the city. I do also want to note really quickly, because I've seen people online, I think, who are lightly aware of this. And I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're like, we should follow the law. We should be law-abiding people, who were cheering on or even lightly applauding what happened on Easter Sunday. And I just want to clarify that the person who put the garbage bag on the pride flags was David Pettinger. And just a little background for people who are not as into the Idaho political scene as, maybe you or I are. He doxed the former Representative Erin von Ellinger's rape victim and then dressed up like her to mock her. He started the legislative session in blackface. He dressed up like Hitler at a recent protest, not in a saying that was wrong, but in a like Hitler was right kind of a way. He was also one of the people arrested for protesting at the home of former Ada County Commissioner Diana Lacchiando. So if you're going to cheer and you think you're cheering for like being law-abiding, I think you just need a little background on who some of these people are. Or I hope that would maybe make you pause before you cheer for that action. What kind of a message do you think it sent that the mayor herself on Easter Sunday came to restore the flag and take down the flag that David Pettinger had put up?
Yeah, I think that it makes this whole conflict a little bit more personal, which I think is an interesting move, just because like she could have had anyone go down there and do that, right? But she chose to do it. And so I'm not going to like put conjecture onto like what she was thinking. And of course she has talked about this a little bit, but I think that it's what it does for me, at least, is, and maybe this is just because of my job as a journalist, but like and also just as someone who thinks about the politics of Boise in the broader context of such a red state, it kind of names the conflict between the city and the state in a way that to me is almost a relief, where it's almost like, okay, yeah, let's at least get the cards on the table. We know that the state is coming for the city, and the city has had to be pretty quote unquote conservative in how directly it addresses that because of the risks that come with that. And that's being pretty generous to the city, but that has been part of it. And I think that, I've certainly felt that at Boise State when I was going there as a student who was also a journalist and just, interested in politics. And so I think that, if you think of it, and this is very rudimentary political thinking really, but it's just like, small blue entity saying no to big red entity. Like, I think that there is value in that. And there is, something worthwhile in not just kind of bending over a little bit. And I think that a lot of blue entities, whether it's, massive state like California, like working against the federal government right now, or whatever, like small university in any other red state, I think that a lot of blue, like liberal organizations are trying to test the waters and kind of seeing like, okay, clearly what we've been doing isn't working to some extent, and we need to try to turn the ship around, and we have momentum. I think that that's the thing that Mayor McLean might be leaning on here, is that we're seeing like hundreds, if not thousands, of Idahoans show up for protests, sometimes multiple protests a week right now, certainly every weekend. And just the momentum there, I think, is something that she's trying to capture and lean into, because there is a value in that. And I'm really interested to see how long that can be maintained, especially as we go into a possible economic recession.
So, Blake, you mentioned earlier that this could cost the city and there could be lawsuits. At what point, for you personally, do you feel like the value that this is adding would be offset by it begins costing the city money, or it becomes more of an issue? At what point would the value not be there anymore for you for this fight?
That's a really good question. I think it makes me think about, other methods of support. Like the thing that it makes me think of is support for queer Idahoans and trans Idahoans, just as people-to-people relationships, and not involving the state being the city or the state, any sort of government. And so, I think that really is a question of how much we can rise up to take care of each other, if the state does end up cutting any funding that goes to whatever for the city. And of course, there's not a lot of city money that goes directly to supporting queer and trans folks, but that's also partially just a statistical thing. So I don't know. I think that that's a really good question, and it just begins towing over the threshold into questions of like, just how do we take care of each other in a time when the government is really failing to do so in a lot of ways. So I'm kind of evading your question by making it a bigger question there, but that's just where my mind goes personally.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Getting in better shape, eating healthier, saving more money, traveling somewhere new? What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks, or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. The Spanish I learned on Babbel really helped me on a recent trip to Mexico City. Ordering in restaurants, shopping at the textile market, cheering on at the Lucha Libre. And I've been keeping it up since I got home. You're a podcast listener. I know that because you're listening here. I bet you'll love Babbel's new podcasts. On Eavesdrop in Espanol, which I listen to, you get to listen to a real conversation, then have the teacher host explain back to you. Then you listen again and catch everything. And you can even read along in the transcript. It's a really fun and effective way to learn. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
What does your mom want for Mother's Day? To feel close to you. So don't forget to give her a call. And a gift that can help you stay connected all year. An Aura digital photo frame. My mom lives in another state and I don't get to see her as much as I want to. I love sharing the meaningful moments in our lives though, like my oldest driving with their permit for the first time, or the kids' elaborate blanket forts. I can snap a photo or video and send it straight to her Aura frame. Aura was named Best Digital Photo Frame by Wirecutter, and after using one, I get why. It makes sharing moments with loved ones feel easy and intentional. Aura has a great deal for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off, plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver Mat frame. That's auraframes.com. Promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Blake, another issue that is near and dear to the heart of people in Boise and more broadly people in Idaho are our recreational spaces and our forests. And Governor Brad Little issued an interesting executive order this past Tuesday, directing the Idaho Department of Lands to increase forest management activities on federal national forests in Idaho, under the guise or what he says will reduce the risk of wildfire. What are your thoughts on this executive order? And I mean, it's in conjunction with an executive order from President Trump. So how do you think those relate, and what do you think the impact is for Idahoans?
This feels like kind of a new phase in how the government is going to approach forests, because there seems to be some sort of tension here where, like, you know, the state and the federal government are saying that we're going to take care of forests more. And meanwhile, they're cutting national park staff, they're cutting Forest Service staff, they're cutting, you know, just everything that's related to public lands. So obviously that there's a dynamic there. There's a tension there where it's a contradiction. And so we are in a position where we can kind of wait and see what the federal government actually ends up doing with this. But it doesn't look great, to be honest. This feels like company town vibe to it. Like, I don't know.
Absolutely.
This feels like a very apparent bait and switch element to me in how the state and the federal government are going to be approaching forests. And then at the same time, there's this other element where, you know, the state is proposing prescribed burns and things like that. Prescribed burns are so important. And Governor Little did mention that in his executive order, that, you know, that has been something that we, you know, especially like Western expansion across the US, like the forest ecology, the health of forest ecology has declined for centuries, partially because of the lack of prescribed burns that were practiced by indigenous communities for a really long time. And in some places still are, but just not, you know, not as widespread. And so like burning, like fires are incredibly important to forest health. So not having those has made things a tinderbox, as he said, and at the same time, is the solution sending in lumber companies, which is like they're admitting part of the plan here. I don't know that makes sense, and I think that a lot of people are going to be, you know, pointing that out as well over the next few weeks as the further like this plan gets rolled out more and more as we head into fire season. Which, you know, I don't need to remind anyone in Idaho, like forest fires are our worst climate kind of threat in Idaho, and they just have such rampant effects on all of our health. Like you once you get started, you can't even stop, and they're just getting worse every year. So yeah. I don't know. What do you think about that contradiction and the kind of bait and switch of it all? Do you see that?
Yeah, no, I'm going to preface everything I say by I'm not an expert, but I did post about this a couple weeks ago, and I got lots of comments, and I realized I really didn't know a lot about forest management. And so I wanted to know more.
It's fascinating. It's a cool world. Yeah.
Yeah. I did a bit of a deep dive because, I mean, I know this is kind of a duh statement, but like the national forests throughout the country are very, very different. And the types of forests, the types of trees, the types of management that are needed are very different. So I do want to, first of all, say that the Trump administration said that a major component of this executive order and of what they want is to bolster the U.S. logging industry. So I think it's fire management. It's bolstering the logging industry under the guise of fire management. And I get that you can do multiple things at once. Two things can be true at the same time. But that President Trump wanted to increase timber production by 25%. Now, I read some really interesting things in a Washington Post article that like you said, Blake, we have had poor forest management. We have high wildfire risk. There's a lot that needs to happen. But what they recommend having happen is removing the undergrowth, and that doesn't yield timber. And so if you cut down a bunch of these trees that could be used for timber and lumber, you leave the young undergrowth that is at particularly high risk for wildfire. And so it doesn't seem like in a lot of forests, you can have both. You can either manage for fires or you can log for timber. And I thought this was really interesting. I read a Science magazine article online about this, and a 2023 study of the economics of forest health found that that logging in northern Idaho and Montana will not reduce wildfire threats and be cost effective, because that's another thing is President Trump and Governor Little are saying, hey, this will pay for itself because they'll be logging, so it'll increase industries and will prevent fires, because we have low value skinny trees, like too skinny, not good for bearing sons.
Wait, who said that?
That was from a 2023 study. Our trees are too skinny.
Okay.
They're not
lodgepole. Like they're naturally skinny. Okay.
They're just too skinny.
Continue.
No,
Okay.
I wanted to throw that in because I was like, what?
Sorry,
when was the
just
last
took
time
me
we
by
talked about
surprise. Yeah, okay.
when was the last time we talked about the value of skinny trees? Anyway, apparently not cost effective. So our forests are not cost effective for logging if you're wanting to prevent fires. Again, it's not both. And I'm not an expert. I've never logged. I just hang in the forests. I walk and camp and hot springs. Yeah. So that's all I do. But from what I found, I think it's interesting that Governor Little is supporting this because, again, I'm not an expert, but he has access to experts. And they said, this is not going to be cost effective. These trees are not high value and they're too skinny. And if we clear away these trees that can be used for lumber, we're actually going to be at greater fire risk. So I am quite nervous about how this will turn out.
And you have these, at the same time, these kind of two, twin ecological industry threats of lumber and of timber harvesting and mining. So, mining has been a bigger push in Idaho just in the last couple of years. And right now there are a couple mines that are like possibly under development or going through like the approval process that it's these companies coming in and saying, like, we'll take care of this. This will be good for, like, ecologically. And it's just like, when are we going to learn from history? Like, it was only like 200 years ago that these companies, other companies, of course, but essentially the same companies were coming in and like, just having complete free reign. Of course, there's more regulation now, but they had complete free reign. And we saw what they did to like the Western US. And we're still like trying to clean up the havoc that those companies wreaked. And so now it feels like we're opening the door to that again. And I understand that that's a very one-sided view on that. But at the same time, it just feels like, with all of the other cuts to public lands resources going on, this just feels really scary. It's just really scary, honestly.
Hey, CityCast. According to me and my calculator, you will spend more time this week between the sheets than you will at work. So upgrade your sheets to Cozy Earth. Luxury starts where you rest. I start my evening in buttery soft Cozy Earth bamboo pajamas. Then I dip into a Cozy Earth bamboo sheet set. They are silky and temperature regulating. Forget the 9 to 5. Prioritize your 5 to 9. Cozy Earth products will transform those hours into a sanctuary, and they take comfort seriously with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Luxury should not be out of reach, so Cozy Earth is giving CityCast listeners 40% off their best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. Visit CozyEarth.com and use the code COZYBOISE for 40% off, because you deserve a great night's sleep, and sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
All right, Blake, that was a lot per usual in Idaho and Boise. So let's get into the picks of the week. See if we can maybe turn the vibe around before the weekend. I wanted to start with mine. So my pick of the week, I'm really looking forward to it, is restorative yoga and crystal sound baths that happen once a month at the Meridian Community Center. And I look forward to them every single month because it's a lot. There's a lot going on right now. And it is the person who does this is incredible. And it's a very it's not like hardcore yoga. It's very much a hey, have you had a week? Come do some relaxing poses, work on your breath, and then we'll do a sound bath, which I 100% of the time fall asleep during, but that's great. I love it.
I love that. I feel like so many people that I know are getting into sound baths or like meditations or some sort of way to come back into your body after everything that we've been going through. Mine is actually kind of related. It's an installation at Searle's Place that is being put together by the Backyard Artists, which I've talked about before. They've been on the show before. I'm part of, but more on like the literary side of things. This is like a visual art and kind of multimedia art event that some of our team has put together, and it's called Body and Devotion, and it's these 4 incredible artists. A lot of them have ties to Boise State and just the broader Boise community that are putting together these like interactive pieces that I think are going to be really, really cool. There's like an opening recession that's kind of invite only mostly tonight, Friday night, and then the gallery is open from noon to 4 on both Saturday and Sunday. And that's at Searle's Place again. It might be a little bit rainy this weekend, but, I think it's always fun to kind of go walk around Garden City and, pop into Searle's Place, grab a coffee, push pour, just like walk around, go check out Old Speak if you hadn't yet, just hit the Greenbelt. Like, it's just fun to hang out in that area. And I think that this art show is going to be really cool, and it's free.
No, I love that. Like you said, it's supposed to be a little stormy this weekend. So that sounds like the perfect way to kind of encourage people to get out, still go out, even if it's not sunny and beautiful out there. And down.
Go see some art.
Yeah, I think that sounds really fantastic. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Noah Snyderman, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our theme music is by Up Is the Down Is the, with additional music from All the Kimonos, Wendy Marcini, and Hip Color. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back on Monday with a look at how Boise weathered the legislative session. See you then.